finish chapter 6 up tonight and roll on into chapter 7. We've seen the broad observation is that sin brings consequences, and at least on one occasion there were worldwide, universal consequences for sin. The application of the text we'll hopefully get to tonight, and that is accountability. And really, Genesis 6 and verse 22 has a permanent principle that applies to everyone, that if we'll grasp, there really is the remedy for sin. Last week we talked about the depravity and the declaration, that is the end of all flesh had come before the Lord. So we begin tonight in verse number 14 of Genesis 6, and this really is the deliverance. And here we're going to see Noah received specific instructions for the ark. It appears that God himself began speaking in verse 13 of chapter 6 and speaks all the way through verse 21. But if someone would, go ahead and read that section out loud for us. Genesis 6, 14 through 22.
Everything that is on the earth shall die. But I will establish my covenant with you, and you shall go into the ark, you, your sons, your wife, and your sons' wives with you. And of every living thing of all flesh you shall bring 2 of every sort into the ark, to keep them alive with you. They shall be male and female. Of the birds of their kind, of animals after their kind, of every creeping thing of the earth after its kind. 2 of every kind will come to you to keep them alive. And you shall take for yourself all food that is eaten, and you shall gather it to yourself, and it shall be food for you and for them. Thus Noah did, according to all that God commanded him, so he did.
Good, thank you very much. There, verse number 14. God here speaking to Noah seems to have been audible out loud. Regardless, Noah understood. Make thee an ark of gopher wood, rooms shalt thou make in the ark, and shalt pitch it within and without with pitch. Now, whether built by Noah alone, or Noah and his sons alone, or whether any others may or may not have helped, the result is the same. What does it change for you and for me? So who built the ark? I don't know. Maybe it was just Noah. Did his sons help him? Maybe they did. Did they subcontract it out? What if they did? What would it really matter one way or another? The ark is basically a box or a chest. We might see in our minds a boat, and I guess to some extent that might be the case, but it's just imagine in your mind a box or a chest. It's the same thing Moses was placed into, but obviously here on a much larger scale, much smaller scale than what Moses was placed in Exodus 2, 1-5. Noah was told to make the ark of gopher wood. Some say that's cypress wood. Some say it's the way the wood was to be planed or formed. It could have been some sort of wood that existed before the flood. What was it for sure? I don't know. Guess who did know? Noah knew exactly what it was, and he understood exactly what God meant. Make thee an ark of gopher wood, rooms. Notice this. How many? Don't know. What sizes? Don't know. Perhaps it was left up to Noah's discretion. It seems to me the Bible doesn't say. So let's take a quick excursion here on the concept of authority. There is both generic authority in this verse and specific authority. Can you notice the difference? What would be specific in this verse? Gopher wood. Notice if God would have just said wood, it would be anything that would have fallen under the category of wood. But when God specified gopher wood, what did he mean? So it couldn't be whatever gopher wood was or is, or maybe we know it by something else, or whether it was how it was to be formed, that's what it had to be. But what's generic? What about rooms? Do you see that? How many? Don't know. What sizes? Don't know. But they were to have what? Rooms. So do you see the difference between specific authority and generic authority? If God would have just simply said, now let's try and get a quick application, worship. then it'd be whatever. But when Jesus said in spirit and in truth, there you go. There's how worship has to be. And then we have to figure out what do those things mean. Then we go through the New Testament and we see, are there any specified actions that fall under the category of spirit and truth? And what's the answer to that? Yes. So when we begin to look at things, sometimes it's generic, it's broad, but sometimes it's specific. Singing is actually quite specific. And notice, it's not just we're not just to sing whatever comes into our minds. Psalms, hymns, and spiritual songs, you see. Make thee an ark of gopher wood, rooms shalt thou make in the ark, and shalt pitch it. The idea of pitch is to cover. Probably this was some sort of a sealant, some sort of a coating. What color was it? I don't know. You know who did know? Noah knew, didn't he? And those who were with him that lived to tell it, they knew what it was. Perhaps it was like, in my mind, I guess it'd be like the black tar that you may see some roofers use from time to time, especially on flat roofs. It's probably designed maybe somewhat as a shock absorbent, because we're going to see, I don't know that they just were floating out on the pond, so to speak. It probably was pretty intense, at least for about 150 days or so. But notice verse 15, within, without, with pitch, some type of a sealant, some type of a coating. And this is the fashion which thou shalt make it of. The length, right? The length of the ark shall be 300 cubits. The breadth of it 50 cubits, and the height of it 30 cubits, assuming an 18-inch cubit. That is about from the bend of your elbow, or where your elbow bends, to the tip of your middle finger. Okay, that's assuming what a cubit would be. However, some make the case that it's from the back of your elbow. Like if you went up like this to the end of your middle finger, on the average man, that's about 21 inches. But assuming an 18-inch cubit, though it could have been a little bit more, the dimensions would equate to what we know as 450 feet long. That's pretty long when you think about it. 75 feet wide. That's pretty wide when you begin to think about it. And 45 feet tall in height. Now, most estimate that a chest or box, essentially of that size, would have held or could have held over 500 box cars. Remember, especially if you live in Thomasville, train town, you see the trains coming through and they're pulling all this behind them. Look at one of those big box cars. Imagine 500 of those. This is a massive, massive vessel. So more than 500 box cars worth of life and material. When we stop to think about it, there was really plenty of room. And the guys who are super smart, they estimate, based off what it means, what a kind actually means, the ark was only about half full. Now recall, we haven't read it from the text of Genesis, but Peter told us, and he was an inspired man, wasn't he? What was Noah? Noah was a preacher of righteousness. Well, what do you think he preached for probably over 100 years? You have the opportunity to get on to this ark. Whether it was in process, how long did it take him to build it, I have no idea. We go through the VBS material, they give some estimations of things, which is fine, but it appears that it was there, and that Noah was preaching righteousness. He was preaching the commandments of God. The guys who are super smart, and ladies, estimate the ark was only about half full, so there was plenty of room for others. Application. How do you fill up the Lord's church? We ain't even filled up the building. You can't fill up a spiritual organism. There's always plenty of room in the Lord's church, and in fact, looks like we got plenty of room in the building, don't we? Yes, indeed we do. Notice verse 16, a window. This is some sort of opening near the top of the ark, probably for light, ventilation, etc. We read Genesis 8 and verse 13. And that lets us know there was some sort of a covering, maybe an awning, associated with or perhaps above that window. And this, or a window rather, shalt thou make to the ark, and in a cubit shalt thou finish it above, and the door. The door we'll see, I think, was set in the side of the ark. How large? I don't know. Maybe you do, because I don't. And the door of the ark shalt thou set in the side thereof, with lower, second, and third stories, or decks, I think Frankie read, shalt thou make it. So there are 3 decks, 3 levels, 3 stories. How large? Well, if it was 45 feet in height, maybe it was 15, 15, 15. I don't know. Maybe it was some other type thing. But guess who knew? And as we read forward, did it work? It worked. So whatever it was, I don't know that I can answer any question that could be asked, but we read ahead, right? So what Noah was told to do, he did it, and it worked. Okay? Verse 17, and behold I, who's speaking? This is the Lord speaking. Localized flood. One important question that's always been in my mind. What significance would the bow in the clouds possess? We generally call that a rainbow, because localized floods still occur over in what we might call the Bible lands. They occur basically all over the world. So if we were to just say, to take the position that this was just a localized flood, if God gave a time limit of 120 years, how far could you walk in 120 years? You just literally walked away and said, oh no, let's walk for 120 years and get out of where the destruction is going to come. So there is no reason why anybody would try and act like the Genesis flood was localized. What purpose does that serve? It was worldwide, global, and universal in scope. Now it appears that for land-dwelling, we might say oxygen-breathing creations of God, the ark was the single location of safety. Can you think of a spiritual application of that? The Lord has one place that He places all the saved. Where is that? Are we ashamed of that? Because that's the truth of the Scriptures, isn't it? There is one place of spiritual safety for whosoever will, especially for those who have sinned and violated God's Word. There's one place. It's the Lord's church for spiritual safety. Notice verse 18, but. What's the general rule? Everything that's in the earth shall die, but with thee I will establish my covenant. And thou shalt come into the ark, thou and thy sons. How many do you have, so far as we know? At least named that are with him here, Shem, Ham, and Japheth, right? And thy wife. Noah had one wife. What was her name? Mrs. Noah works for me. That's the best I can do. I don't know. The Bible doesn't say what her name was. And thy sons' wives. When we read 1 Peter 3 and verse 20, it allows us to see that there were 8 souls in all. So you got Noah, Shem, Ham, Japheth. And if there's 8, how many wives did each one of those men have? 1. Right? That's right. Now, why Mrs. Noah, Shem, Ham, Japheth, and whatever their respective wives' names were, 8 souls in all, again, according to 1 Peter 3 and verse 20. Why these people? Perhaps because they were all faithful. Perhaps that's just what God had said, but we already alluded to it earlier. Don't forget that the Bible affirms that Noah was what? A preacher of righteousness, 2 Peter 2 and verse 5, and that all the commandments of God are righteousness, Psalm 119, 172. So it appears that other human beings were invited. You can come. You can be part of this. But what did they do? It appears that they disregarded the invitation. You see any spiritual applications of that? Whosoever will. Remember the great invitation, really the last chapter of the Bible? Come and drink of the water of life freely. Where are they? So it's open, just like it was for them, but we're going to notice something as we read forward. When the Lord shuts the door, that's it. So the long-suffering of God has limits, doesn't it? Even from the spiritual application of that. What happens? Death or the second coming. Every one of us has an appointment. Which one's coming first? Don't know. Better be prepared today and listen to the invitation, right? Now, this is also, interesting fact, the first usage in both Hebrew and English of the word covenant. Here it is. Who used it? God. With whom did he use it? Well, he may have had, you can make the case he had a covenant with Adam and other people, but here, the first time it's used in the Scripture, It's from God to who? But with thee. Who was God talking to? Noah expressly. Will I, who was speaking? God himself, the Lord. Establish my covenant. Think of a covenant as a testament. God is superior. You get into the Greek language, and there's two different Greek words that can be used. One can be between equals, but one is from a superior. Okay? Is God superior to man? So whether we agree or disagree, better do what God has told us to do if we plan on being blessed. Right? Verse 19. And of every living thing, of all flesh, two, we'll talk more about this, two of every sort shalt thou bring into the ark to keep them alive with thee. They shall be male and female, of fowls or birds after their kind. Think kind, able to reproduce. And of cattle after their kind, of every creeping thing of the earth after his kind, two of every sort shall... Now what do you notice? How is Noah going to go round up all these animals? He didn't. What do you mean? Look at the language of the Bible. Shall come unto thee to keep them alive. Now, two of every sort seems to indicate those animals not used in sacrifices. We'll get into chapter 7 maybe tonight. We'll see even at this time there was a difference between clean animals and unclean animals. Okay? So it's probably talking, at least at this point, about those animals not used in what would have been sacrifices at the time. Now, interesting questions. Were the male and female able to reproduce? That is, obviously, yes. Of the same kind? How many? Well, it says two. What do you mean by two? Wouldn't that be more than 0 and less than 3? Or more than 1 and less than 3 at least? So you got, it's not 1, but it's not 3. However, when we roll into chapter 7, we get another language, some more interesting language introduced to us, and that is by sevens. Which, would that be like male, female, male, female, male, female, then what would the seventh one be in? Or did it mean 7 pairs? Just like the 2 here, male and female, could that have meant 2 pairs of male and female? We'll let you wrestle that question, but guess what? What's it going to change no matter what we say? What's it really going to change? If we say it's 2 pairs or 2, if we say 7 as in 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, or if we say 7 pairs, what changes for us? So just think about it. I think most of the time we've seen pictures all our lives and we think it's 2 and 2 and 2. It may have been 2 pairs of each kind. That's just something to think about. Now, notice, observe carefully that Noah didn't have to go round them up, did he? God said, towards the end there of verse 20, of fowls after their kind, or verse 20, and of cattle after their kind, of every creeping thing of the earth after his kind, 2 of every sort shall come unto thee. Now, think about what this does not say. It does not say, necessarily, that male and female of every full-grown animal in existence would come to Noah. Someone might say, were there dinosaurs on the ark? Well, we would answer that as yes. There were. But were they 60 feet long and weighing 200 tons? Probably not. You understand? I think we do. Now, it appears that based off that language, God sent to Noah what God sent. So Noah didn't have to go try and find a full-grown this or full-grown that. It would seem, though, that with a male and female, they would have been of age to reproduce within a reasonable amount of time of exiting the ark. I think we would all basically have to conclude that. Now notice verse 21. And take thou unto thee, now this is what Noah had to do, take thou unto thee of all food that is eaten, and thou shalt gather it to thee, and it shall be food for thee and for them. This is difficult. The text of Genesis thus far has declared that man was to consume what we might say is fruits and vegetables. Things along those lines, according to Genesis 1, 29 and 30. However, after, reading ahead, after Noah, his family, and the animals exit the ark, man clearly had authority to eat things in addition to herbs and whatever you might want to say, fruits, vegetables, vegetarian, vegan, I don't know how you really express that. Now, someone might say, you mean to tell me that lions and tigers and bears ate fruits and vegetables? I don't know how I feel about that. But based off what the text of Genesis says, what can we prove? What can we put our finger on thus far and prove? I'd say fruits and vegetables, wouldn't you? But then that brings in another whole scope of things, which, that's beyond my ability to understand. But here's what I know: we're way on the other side of the flood. We're not living before the flood. We're living well on the other side of the flood, where there may be some difficult things. Even if I were to stand up here and say, I know for a fact that man before the flood didn't eat what we might call meat, as in animal flesh, what would that mean for us today? Because on the other side of the flood, we do have authority to do that. So even if one way or another, what would it really change for us today? It might be interesting to know for sure, but even if we knew for sure, what would it change? So just think about things like that from some time. Notice verse 22. How did Noah understand this? Thus did Noah, according to how much? All here, there's no reason, so all means all. According to all that God commanded him, so did he. Perhaps this is an inspired explanation of what it looked like for one to walk with God. Did the text tell us that Noah walked with God? Look in this chapter at verse 9. Did Enoch before him walk with God? Well, what, in the practical language, we might say, what did that look like? It means that Noah did according to all that God commanded him. That's what it means, really, to walk with God. In a practical sense, we believe that Genesis 6 and verse 22 is still the remedy for sin in its broadest sense, an inspired answer concerning what are we to do with our brief lives? What are we supposed to do with our lives? Make a bunch of money? Spend a bunch of money? Buy a bunch of property? What are we supposed to do with our brief lives? What really is the purpose of life? Why am I here? Where am I going? And what am I supposed to do while I'm here? One book answers that, the Bible. Here's a picture of a man that lived way in the really same planet we're on, but in a different world. Peter, 2 Peter 3, compares it like two different worlds, but the same place. But things have changed. Did he make it? Yes, he made it. Did he influence his family to make it? Yes, he did. What's the secret? What's the catch? Genesis 6:22. Thus did Noah. Now, think about that just for a second. We have some people, maybe even among us today, that don't think we can read the Bible and understand it. That we need some type of guidance, some type of enlightenment, some type of direct operation from the Spirit. Where'd Noah get any of that? Maybe he did, but maybe he didn't. He heard what God said and realized it wasn't that Noah, it doesn't seem like, say, fellas, I really wasn't paying that great of attention when he said that. Did you all remember, fellas, anybody else remember what he said about the length and the height and the width? Did you all catch that? Because I was thinking about, I was wandering for a minute. You ever thought about that? I wonder how many times God said this to me. Did he have to come to him every day? Say, hey, this many cubits, this many cubits, this many cubits. Or did he hear that one time? He got it. I wonder what type of impression it would leave on you to hear the audible voice of God. Can't say as I know. Do you know how does that feel? Have any of y'all ever heard the audible voice of God? Have you? You haven't. So we don't know. But don't you think that would make quite an impression on you? We think so. Well, let's roll. Anybody got any questions about 6? Because we got way too much time just to say, okay, have a nice day. We got work to do, right? Let's go on into Genesis 7, and we'll title this chapter Rain. Observations. There were 3 destructive factors in the flood. They were the fountains of the great deep, the windows of heaven, and the rain. It wasn't just rain. There were 3 destructive factors. Be the word arrogance. All humanity was given time, 120 years, and preaching for at least, I would say, the majority of that, if not all of it. Yet all but 8 souls refused to obey. It appears that they knew more than God, But we'll keep reading and we'll see who knows what, right? In Genesis 7, 1 through 10 here, we'll see the deadline. Noah and his family were to enter the ark. It appears that God said it's coming in 7 days. If someone would read Genesis 7, 1 through 10 out loud for us, please.
And the Lord said unto Noah, Come thou and all thy house into the ark. For thee have I seen righteous before me in this generation. Of every clean beast thou shalt take to thee by sevens, the male and his female, and of the beasts that are not clean by two, the male and his female. Of the fowls also of the air by sevens, the male and the female, to keep seed alive upon the earth, the face of all the earth. For yet 7 days I will cause it to rain upon the earth, 40 days and 40 nights, and every living substance that I have made will I destroy from the face of the earth. Now Noah did according unto all that the Lord commanded him. And Noah was 600 years old when the flood of waters was upon the earth. And Noah went in, and his sons, and his wife, and his sons' wives with him into the ark, because of the water of the flood, of clean beasts, and of beasts that are not clean, and of fowls, and of everything that creepeth upon the earth. There went in two unto Noah and the ark, the male and the female, as God had commanded Noah. And it came to pass after 7 days that the waters of the flood were upon the earth.
Good, thank you very much. Notice verse 1, And the Lord said unto Noah, Come thou, and all thy house into the ark. Why? For thee, have I seen righteous before me in this generation. The ark was now completed, and the opportunity for others to enter in was soon about to close. Now again, we're going to reiterate this point time and again. The text of Genesis doesn't say this, but Peter affirmed that Noah was what? A preacher of righteousness. 2 Peter 2:5. And it's reasonable to conclude that Noah had been preaching the Word of God for over 100 years. But yet, what does the Lord still here say? Come thou and all thy house. Imagine a preacher that preached for over 100 years and converted no one. He probably wouldn't make it 100 years, would he? Was the problem with the message? Of course not. Was the problem with the messenger?